What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the third episode of the Sick Podcast with your host, That Leafs Fan. I hope you guys are ready for today because we're going to be diving into a whole bunch of stuff like the Leafs' first preseason win. We're going to be talking about Conor Bedard, some other hot takes, and going to finish it off with a little Leafs trade that I think they should get done for this upcoming season. But for now, thank you very much for tuning in. Producer, roll the tape.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With That Leafs Fan.
They score! They score! Holy mackerel, they score! Morgan Riley! Mo Riley! The Leafs have won it! They're going to the second round! Do you believe this? Holy mackerel!
The sickest Toronto Maple Leafs podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Ladies and gentlemen, they've done it. The Leafs have done it. They got their first preseason win of the 2023-24 season. Let's head into the recap. A fun little fact about this preseason game, it was not played in the Sabers arena. It was not played in the Leafs arena. It was played at the Joe Thornton Community Center. And although the arena was small, the crowd was electric, filled with young fans, very passionate. I don't know why I said very 5 times, but we're going to roll with it because that's just how today has been going. Let's get into the game. What happened? How did they do? How did we win this one? Here we go. Getting straight into this one, I want to preface it by simply saying, finally, the Leafs started a game on time. It's very important to start on time. Sometimes, even though you start on time, it might not go your way. We've been recording this podcast for about 50 minutes right now, and it's try 67. You know, you got to tie the 67 in there. But all jokes aside, the Leafs finally get this one going, and they actually start when the clock starts ticking. And it's very important that they did. I'm happy they did because the first 2 games kind of pissed me off that they did not. As you guys heard me say in the previous episode, starting on time is a key way to win games and put yourself in a position to win. And that is exactly what the Leafs do here in the first period. Connor Timmins making it 1-0 for the Leafs. And Connor Timmins is a name you're going to be hearing a lot more of in this podcast. So the Leafs jump out to a 1-0 lead. It doesn't last very long because the Sabres do come back and equalize it, making it 1-1, and that is how we go into the first intermission. Something I noticed about the overall game in this one was the fact that there was a lot more sloppy, both for the Sabres and the Leafs. Again, it's normal to see these kind of things in the preseason, but the passes just were not nearly as crisp. There was a lot more missed passes that ended up turning into icings or offside. However, the second period gets underway. Something I did notice from the get-go of this game, all throughout the first, into the second, and as well happening in the third, was the fact that this was a much more sloppy game by both teams. And it's something it's going to be very normal in the preseason to see, is the fact that the passes are not nearly as crisp. A lot of these passes ended up leading to icings or offsides, and it just wasn't as crisp as you would expect for an NHL game. However, the one thing that was dialed in this game was the crowd. A very young crowd in a very relatively smaller arena than we are used to, but the crowd was electric, filled with young and passionate fans, and that is something you love to see. And that is something the Leafs definitely fed off of, because in the second period, they come out with a much stronger start, unfortunately taking a penalty and are now shorthanded 1-1. How is this going to go? Are the Sabres going to take the lead? The answer to that question is no. The Toronto Maple Leafs are playing good penalty killing minutes in their own zone. They're holding the pressure. They're keeping the Sabres to the outside, and a block shot happens, which ends up leading to an odd man rush. And that leads to Sam Lafferty scoring the first shorthanded goal for the Leafs in the preseason, and it's now 2-1. A topic that has been much more prevalent through this offseason is the fact that penalty killers and teams with their units are trying to focus a lot more on how to turn the PK into an offensive opportunity, and that is exactly what we see the Leafs do. I believe this season there's going to be a lot more goals that are scored shorthanded compared to seasons prior. And speaking of that, it didn't just happen once in this penalty kill where the Leafs ended up getting an opportunity. At the end of the penalty kill, Max Domi comes out of the box and is already sprung onto a breakaway, and he absolutely snipes it exactly where it should be. 3-1 Toronto. Wasn't expecting that. I got to be honest, I was not expecting the Leafs to do that. When I saw them took a penalty, I'm like, this is not going to end well. We're going to go right back into how the first and second game started and go back into a deficit. And we end up walking out of that penalty up 2 goals, which we weren't, which is nice. Go Leafs. After scoring 2 unanswered goals, the Buffalo Sabres do eventually end up getting one back, bringing the lead down to 3-2 rather than 3-1, and that is how we head into the second intermission. So now the Leafs head into the third period, and it is the first time they are leading heading into the last 20 minutes, so they have to come out strong, they have to come out prepared, and they got to close this one out the same way the Senators did it to them in the first and second game. Luckily, they do exactly that. They start the third period with fire, they're heading in with pressure, they're holding zone time, and this leads to a Conor Timmins very great play, carrying the puck from his own end into the Sabres zone, crossing it over to the big red dog, Kyle Clifford, who pots it in and restores the 2-goal lead, 4-2 Toronto. The saying of this episode is going to be third time's the charm. First of all, because it is the third episode. And second of all, because Conor Timmins, once again, for the third time, gets on the board and scores yet another goal, his second of the game, with an absolute laser beam into the top right corner. It is now 5-2 Toronto, and it is also now how the game would come to an end. The Leafs pick up their first preseason victory of the season. Let's head into what I thought were the keys to the game and what I ended up taking as my biggest takeaways from this performance. To any Leaf fan who watched this game, something you really probably noticed was, like I mentioned several times throughout this recap, Conor Timmins. He looked like an actual option that we can be using throughout the season. We saw glimpses of him last season where he wasn't exactly electrifying offensively, but what we were able to get out of him was useful minutes, and he didn't really shoot ourselves in the foot. He was providing a lot of solid minutes, whether it led to the other team losing their momentum, whether it led to just being able to have that extra body in the lineup. And I think Conor Timmins is really fighting for a roster spot here. I really think he is. And I think he has a serious shot at actually cracking the lineup. I definitely think Conor Timmins was the star of this game, and I think many other people can agree with me. The reason I'm excited to see this performance, again, not too focused on the fact that he scored 3 points tonight and that he had 2 goals, although I did enjoy that. I think what this shows Toronto is that they have options and that they do not need to burn out their players this season. Most notably, Mark Giordano. As you guys know, he is a very old defenseman. He's been in the league for a very long time, and he is aging. And with age, although he is very good, no disrespect to him, he could burn out. And I think having a player like Conor Timmins being able to sub in and out with him and being able to alternate within games could keep them both into their top levels of performances without having to take out too much out of their game, risking less injury, risking less fatigue, and just risking an overall more efficient performance. So I think this was a very good show by Timmins, and I think that the Leafs are definitely keeping an eye out on him to see how they can utilize him into this 2023-24 season. My favorite takeaway from this entire game was this. I mentioned it in the previous first 2 games. It was more shots from the point. I have been yelling at my TV every time either it's Morgan Riley or whether it was Brody or whether it was Muzzin at the time. This team does not shoot from the point. They expect it to all come from in the middle of the slot. I don't know why I just bugged there, but it's fine. We roll with it. They don't take point shots. They didn't take point shots nearly enough. And I think what I am noticing in this preseason, and it's been relatively consistent in these first 3 games, they're just shooting a lot more from the point. And I can recall just the 2 goals we scored in the first preseason game, another 2 we scored tonight. They're coming from the point. And I think the Leafs should definitely take note of that and definitely implement it into their game. Point shots work. You have an opportunity to screen the goalie. And like I mentioned, when the goalie doesn't see the puck, he is just another human being, no matter how skilled, no matter who his name is. If he doesn't see it and the puck's heading into the net, chances are it's going to turn out to be a goal. So I think point shots is something the Leafs definitely need to carry over into the season a lot more than they've done in the previous years. However, what I will say on a more positive note is that I really have been enjoying the Leafs depth play. I think we're seeing a lot of players that we can use into real potential options here heading into the season. Obviously, we know Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Bertuzzi, all of these names, even Max Domi, not worried about him. We already know he's going to be a regular. I'm talking about players like Timmins, watching players like him, watching players like Lafferty. These are players who are really fighting for their full-time roster spot or even just to crack the lineup. And so to see them working this hard and that it's actually generating results and that it's generating real opportunities, I think is a really positive sign for Leaf fans watching this game. I think that is something you should definitely be happy about for sure. So that does it for the post-game recap. Leafs finally picking up their first W of the season against a division rival, the Buffalo Sabres. Now let's head into my favorite topic of today, Conor Bedard. So let's head into something that I think every single person listening to this podcast, every single hockey fan watching games is excited to see, and that is Conor Bedard. We are finally about to witness his first ever preseason game, and his first game NHL debut in the regular season is just very few days away. What I want to say, a couple weeks max, just about 2. We're going to be actually seeing Conor Bedard in the NHL. We've seen a lot of him throughout the juniors. We've seen him play in the WHL with the Regina Pats. We've seen that this kid can dominate. And a question I've been getting a lot is, will he turn the domination he's done in the juniors into NHL success? And that is something I can't exactly answer. But what I can say is there's been many examples of players who have performed extremely well in the juniors, some who have been able to turn that into an NHL career, others who have kind of struggled with the adapting of the difference in league. The NHL is a league like no other hockey league. Conor Bedard stood out with the Regina Pats. He stood out in the juniors, and I truly believe that he can turn this pure domination into a very, very stellar career, and that he could potentially be a very, very, very big star. We have been watching him now for, I want to say, the better part of 3 years. So there's a lot of expectation on this kid's shoulders to perform. There's a lot of expectation from the Blackhawks fan base. There's a lot of expectation even from fans like me and you who don't exactly care a whole lot about the Hawks. I just want to see him do well. Like, as a Canadian boy, I would love to see Conor Bedard absolutely dominate the league. I've been seeing a lot of comparisons of people saying that Conor Bedard is going to be the next Connor McDavid and that he could be showing flashes of a Crosby. I think that's taken it a step too far, to be honest. And it's no disrespect to Bedard. It's more of, I don't want to be disrespecting the careers of Sidney Crosby or the excellence of McDavid. Obviously, dominating in the juniors is one thing. Carrying that pure dominance over into the NHL is something completely different. Although I do think Conor Bedard has a great chance of doing so, we will have to wait and see before making any assessment on that. Something I really wanted to get into was my point and goal prediction for Mr. Bedsy himself. As you guys saw, once again, in the juniors, this guy was looking at an average about 3 points per game on a regular night. He had nights of 5, 6, maybe even 7, if I recall correctly. But what's he going to be doing in the league? What is he going to be doing for the Blackhawks? How many points, how many goals is he getting? I think, personally, that if all goes well, if he stays healthy, and if he is truly able to carry it over, I think in his first rookie season, he should be anywhere in the point per game range. I think he touches just a tad over 30 goals. I really do think he does. He's going to be getting a lot of minutes on the Blackhawks. They are a very young team, and someone does have to score for them, and I think Conor Bedard will be that guy. I think something that is very underrated of Bedard, obviously people talk about his electrifying shot, which he has an absolute wrist missile, and it's very scary to see. I think people very much underrate his ability to create plays from turning nothing into something stellar. We've seen it in, like I said, in the juniors. We saw him do a lot of that with Team Canada in the World Junior Tournament. And I think that is where he's going to pick up the better half of his points, meaning the assists. I think he even has a shot at hitting 45 to 50. So in terms of my point prediction, I think he finishes anywhere from, let's say, 30 goals, 45 assists, somewhere in that range, making it like anywhere from 70 to 80 points would be my honest prediction. But I really do want to hear from you guys. What are you guys thinking? How are you feeling about Bedsy? What do you expect out of him? Do you want him to do well? Do you not want him to do well? I think it is going to be something very good for the NHL if he does do well. It's going to bring a lot more of the younger generation into watching the game. People who, I really believe that players like Bedard, players like McDavid, players like Crosby, they bring people who don't normally watch hockey, who don't normally care about hockey. You want to watch greatness. Like, I'll be very honest with you. I don't really have many cares for golf. I don't really have many cares for baseball. But I would love to watch Tiger Woods dominate. I do love watching Shohei Ohtani put up ridiculous performances. Even though I'm not a huge fan of the sport, it brings me to watch it. And I think having someone like Conor Bedard in the league and having him performing well could really help grow the game. And I think that is very, very important. And it helps everyone. It's good for everyone. It helps the sport grow. That can bring more of a budget to the league. It can bring more viewers. It can spark more conversations. And I really think it is something very important. And I hope that Conor Bedard can turn into something extremely special. He has already been something special, but what I say that I mean in terms of the NHL level. So we're going to have to see. The season is weeks away. His first preseason game is actually today for the Blackhawks. So we're going to see how he performs. But I want to hear, like I said, from you guys in the comment section. What do you guys think Conor Bedard is going to turn out to be? How do you think his first season is going to go? I'm excited to hear it, and I'm excited to see it, and I know you are too. So I just finished talking about a player who is on the rise, and now I want to start talking about a team who I think, this is a pretty big hot take, but I want to talk about a team who I truly believe is going to start the decline, and that is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, before anyone jumps the gun and thinks that I'm going to go say this is an awful team, that's not the case. What I do mean to say is everything like in this world that goes up has to eventually come down. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have been on a ridiculous dynasty run. We're talking about a team that showed up to the Stanley Cup Finals 3 years in a row, won 2 of them. They've just been playing nonstop hockey. Every other team has some time off. The Bolts have not. And I think that takes a toll on a team. And I think it's very normal for a dynasty to eventually falter. It's like anything, like any empire, like anything, everything that goes up eventually has to come down. That's just the matter of fact. That's just the way how life works. And I think with the fact that the Tampa Bay Lightning have not seen any big new additions, matter of fact, not many new additions at all in this offseason. Their players are all 1 year older. And something I really wanted to focus on was the fact that the Bolts and their captain, Steven Stamkos, there's been a lot of tension there. Stamkos wants to have an extension. He wants to be able to negotiate. And he's been expressing the fact that the Bolts have not been very reciprocative when it comes to the negotiations. And that kind of pissed him off. And the reason once I saw that, I'm like, oh, it's definitely something notable, because tension always creates falter, in my opinion. Because you see it kind of in any league. Whenever there's a story coming out to the public, it's because it's been there for a while. It's been something that's happening, and then for it eventually to surface, I think it's very, very key to be seeing things like this and to notice them, because again, we've seen it, especially like with I've noticed it with teams like Toronto. I'm sure other people, like other fan bases, can point out other moments for them. But when there is tension amongst the team, it affects the room, it affects the chemistry, and ultimately it affects the performance of the team. So that I really believe that, again, as much of a hot take as it is, I don't think it's that unrealistic to say that the Tampa Bay Lightning era is gonna begin, not completely, but I think it is the beginning of the end of their insane dynasty. And I don't think they're going to be a bottom of the barrel team at all. They still have some insane players: Kucherov, Hedman, Vasilevsky, Stamkos, but there's no new players. We saw it at the end of last year where they started to struggle. We noticed there was something, just they weren't the Bolts they were of the years prior. And this year, if they have no new players, their players are all 1 year older, you have to expect some sort of a decline, at least in my opinion. Absolutely fantastic team to watch. Completely amazing. And I think many, matter of fact, all teams in the NHL should have taken some notes throughout these past couple seasons, because the Tampa Bay Lightning have done something truly special, and that is win a back-to-back championship and follow that up with another Stanley Cup final appearance. That's a lot of hockey. That is a lot of hockey, especially doing that during the pandemic. To actually be able to pull that off and to get the results is absolutely incredible. And but eventually I do think someone's time has to come, and I think the Tampa Bay Lightning time has come. And I think you're going to start noticing a bit of a decline with all these teams in the Atlantic Division growing and their rookies getting better and teams starting to rise to the occasion. There has to be someone in there who's going to falter. And I think, unfortunately, for the Bolts, it is them who are going to get caught in the crossfire, as they are becoming, like I mentioned, an older team with, although a lot of experience, age does start to show the flaws. So I just think that that's my hot take for this season. And I might be completely wrong, and I totally don't mind hearing what you guys think about this. But I really do think that the Tampa Bay Lightning decline will start to emerge, and it will be relatively prevalent throughout this season. But we're going to have to see. But yeah, something I do want to head into to end this episode is a question a lot of you guys have been asking me. What do you think the Leafs should be doing? Do you think there's any trades the Leafs should be making to get either better offensively, better defensively? And here's how I'm going to answer that. The Leafs do not need any more offensive power. They don't. They have Matthews, they have Marner, they have Nylander, Bertuzzi, Domi, even from defensemen like Klingberg, like where they're literally brought in to produce offensively. Offense is not what they need. And something I have been very keen on is the fact that you probably heard the saying before, you definitely have, defense wins you championships. You can't score your way out of trouble. In the season, you can. In the playoffs, you saw it last year, you can't. The defense wins you championships. That's the matter of fact. And that is why I really believe the Leafs should really begin entertaining the fact that they should be trading for a top 4 stay-at-home solid defenseman, not someone at the end of his career, not someone who could pan out. They need, and spend the money you have to spend, trade the assets you need to trade. Go and acquire that top 4 defenseman who can really stabilize this team's defensive game, especially for the playoffs. I'm not talking about the season. Season and playoffs is as David and Goliath. It's not the same. It's not this. It's a completely different game. The regular season is a lot more alkalade induced, in the sense that it's a lot, I feel at least, that it's a lot more of players focusing on like personal goals, whereas the playoffs really brings the team together, and it's a much more of a team game. Like you guys saw last year, the Panthers were not expected to go as far as they were. Vegas, name me superstars. Like, they do have superstars, don't get me wrong. Like, there's Matthew Tkachuk and Jack Eichel, but the Vegas Golden Knights and the Florida Panthers do not have the best player in the league. Matter of fact, like point blank, period. They don't even have a top 3, in my opinion, but they're some of the most well-rounded teams in the league. Especially you saw like a team like Vegas, where someone gets injured, they have someone to slot in right away. And they have they have a team filled with a bunch of second liners. And although that might not be great for your first line matchup, for your second, third, and fourth, it's fantastic. And that is exactly why I think the Toronto Maple Leafs should really look into stop focusing on the offense. And it's something that they need to go and pick up a top 4 defenseman. It's extremely crucial, I think. And I've been saying this at the top of my lungs for the last 2 years. They don't need someone like Klingberg. They need to go and get a player to a lesser degree of, like, they're not exactly out there, but someone like Roman Josi, like that style of defenseman, who is not always recognized for his offense, although he puts up the points. He is like a true nature defenseman. Like, this guy, when he is on the ice, have fun scoring. It's not happening. He's going to neutralize the other team. Toronto needs to go and get a player like that. Obviously, when you have $11 million invested into several different contracts, like $11 million, Tavares, Matthews, Marner, it's hard to go and find that top caliber defenseman. But I think the Leafs need to really exercise all their options and to go and find someone that can go into the top 4, that can really stabilize this team's defensive game for when the time matters in the playoffs. I'm not talking about the season, as I've reiterated many times. To me, this season is just a matter of getting that XYZ next to your name. The rest is not all that important, in my opinion. the stars have to align at the right time, and the right time is the playoffs. And you can never predict what's going to happen. There's going to be upsets all the time. All you could do is put yourself in the best possible position to win. And I think by the Leafs going to go and chase to find a top 4 defenseman to have on their team in terms of defensive game top 4, I think that puts them in a much better situation to win in a time like the playoffs, rather than going and focus on constant players who can always put up offensive numbers, but their defensive game is lacking. That would probably be something I think the Leafs absolutely need to trade for. But we're going to have to see. The season is just moments away. I cannot wait for the first game to start in the season. Preseason is fun and all. It doesn't mean anything. I want to start watching some games that we can really dive deep into, that are going to get the emotions stirred up. Things that are going to fire you up, that are going to piss you off, that are going to make you excited, because at the end of the day, you can score the craziest goal in the preseason. Sorry for my language, but nobody gives a shit. I want to see these things happen in the season, and I hope you guys are excited too. And that is how I am going to wrap up episode 3 of Leafs Talk on the Sick Podcast with your host, myself, that Leafs fan. I really hope you guys did enjoy. What I do ask from you guys, it would be super, super appreciated if you guys can take a moment and leave a review, whether you're listening to on Spotify, if you're on YouTube, if you can hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and especially a comment. I really do take all the comments seriously. I want to get to know you guys. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to know what you think. So please, if you can take a moment, that would be greatly appreciated. But guys, that is going to be it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching on behalf of the Sick Podcast and myself, that Leafs fan. I love y'all. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Producer, let's roll this one out. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with That Leafs Fan on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.